Hello and welcome to Rediscovering Childhood, a podcast that brings you lots of practical information to help you become a more conscious parent. This podcast is brought to you by Discovery Playtime, an Irish business that provides high-quality educational and sensory toys to help your children develop skills through play. Visit discoveryplaytime.ie or download the app to get inspired. Hello and welcome to episode 5. This is a continuation of the previous episode where we talk with Triona from Early Years Insights about early childhood education and share some parenting tips. In this second part, we will talk about the importance of communication between parents and teachers in early years settings. Triona will also share a few really good tips to help you support your child's transition into school.
How do you think we can work best to help each other be better parents and educators? So kind of bridging the gap between, I suppose, sitting here in the preschool, I'm the educator, and I'm out here, I'm the parent. Whereas like you are both. So how do you think we can kind of help each other stop the barrier?
I have very specific thought about this, and it's all to do with communication. When I did the early years degree and I was working, you can't advise everybody that it's the best way to do it, but because when you'd have your lessons and you'd go into that, like you could immediately see what you could change, and you'd go in and you could do it and you could practice it. One of the biggest things that I did when I was doing the thesis at the end, which of course most people know, level 8 thesis isn't as primary research based. It's more, it's all secondary research, and you do a little bit of primary research. So I would love to do a bigger one if it ever came around. But my whole idea was that how ECC could be so much improved if parents were more aware of what it actually was and how it benefited their children. Because when the ECC came out as a funding as this 3-hour free play school where you could bring your children, everybody was like, woohoo, fantastic. Bring your children there, they stay there. But nobody had any idea of what we were doing with the children in those 3 hours, because obviously, because it was government funded, we had things we had to hit. It wasn't just bring them in and play games. Now, I know play-based learning for me is the biggest thing. So if they came in and just were playing games, that was fine, because there would be an environment set up for them. I won't go off on a tangent down there, but it was always the communication. And what I found through the focus group and the research was that the parents themselves wanted the information. They wanted to know not only what their children were doing, like they loved the pictures and the little daily or weekly observations that went home, but they wanted to know why they were doing it. They wanted to know how we ended up doing that activity. And if we were able to tell them that, well, I didn't pluck that out of my head, but it came from this group of children over here who had an intense interest in firefighters. So we set up a water station and we set up, multiple different things around that. And if you could just tell parents why something was happening. Now, that's a basic example. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes on in preschool and in childcare settings. And there's a lot of different reasons we do them. But if you could set up ways of communication and multiple ways that would suit everybody, because some parents are so busy, they don't have time to stop at a door. Emails be best. Social media, some people choose to do it through. Myself as a parent, I've had various experiences in terms of communication with preschools, mostly positive. There are times I would have liked more communication around a couple of different things. And in those cases, I would always encourage parents to ask. When parents come to me and they're like, I don't really know what he's doing, do you know what they do? And I was like, well, I can tell you a generalized version of what they might be doing, but obviously I don't work there, so I can't. It's like parents don't feel like they can ask. They have this perception that they're going to be taken up as if they're interfering, and that the educators themselves might get defensive, like they're being questioned. My whole thing about communication is, if you set it up right at the start, then it means when those difficult conversations have to happen, you already have a relationship with that person. You shouldn't be waiting until something is wrong or something needs to be said to have that conversation with a parent. When we talk about the preschool bit in a while, that is one of my tips for parents. But when we are communicating properly with parents in a positive way and building that relationship with them, everything else follows naturally from that. But it has to come from both sides. It can't all be one-sided. So parents have to interact with whatever form of communication that is being given to them. And I think settings can be really proactive about finding out what kind of communication suits parents. So would they like an open evening at the start of the year where they come in and they find out all the general information? See other parents, that they can have another, a little conversation with them, get to know some faces, get to know the practitioners, because they could drop their child off with one practitioner and collect them from another, and then the next day there could be somebody else because somebody had to go on a break. You're not building up a consistent relationship. It was the one thing that I used to get in trouble for most, because I always had great relationships with the parents I worked with. I thought, just instinctively, before I ever did the research or anything, instinctively knew, because they're handing you their child. They want a little bit of information back. So I used to make sure that kind of on a weekly basis, I had at least a 2 or 3 minute conversation with a parent about, something they might have done that day, how they were getting on in general. And in one place I worked, I was pulled up on it. I was told I shouldn't be, I was spending too long at the door talking to parents, that other things needed to be happening. Now, I was aware, and it was only ever 2 or 3 minutes, but I never left the kids on their own. I only ever did it when there was other practitioners in the room. I was aware of the health and safety implications. I was aware of everything else going on. I was able to choose my moment. I'm a smart person. I'm not oblivious to everything else that's going on. No, it wasn't a priority. I kind of ignored it because it's what parents wanted. Yeah. Parents absolutely loved that you would take that minute to tell them something about their child, because the children aren't telling them. We all know this. Yeah. Children come and say, no, I did nothing all day, which is frustrating for all involved, but that's just the way they are. But it also meant that if I needed to talk to that parent about something that was a little bit more serious, it meant we already had a relationship, and they weren't going, okay, you're telling me this, what's your name again? And when do you see my child? That we already had a relationship so that they could trust what I was saying, that they knew that I had an insight into their child, that they knew that I was doing this for the benefit of everybody involved, but especially their child, and I wanted to work with them. So it has just knock-on effects through your whole day, through the whole year for parents and the educators, if they can have proper systems of communication. But it means setting them up properly. It means having multiple ways in which you give this information. If you are really short on time as a practitioner, it means you create a wall mural with photographs of everything the children did that week. It's time intensive. I have done it for years. It takes an awful lot of time, but it is always worth doing. Then you've got the books, the paperwork that goes home, whatever format you choose it. I could never understand why settings weren't sending home the kind of the monthly reports and the observations. They have to be done for inspection purposes. Now, that's not the only reason they should be done. They should be done because they benefit the child. You get an insight into what that child's doing, so you know where to go with them next. You know what activities interest them. You know where to guide them, how to set up the environment for them. It also means it meets the inspection criteria. Can never understand why, because we used to do it where you don't photocopy it and give it to the parent, because then that parent is getting into an insight into why you did that and where you're going to go next. You're putting all this work into it, and you're not utilising it to its full extent in a way that will benefit everybody so much.
It's nearly secret, isn't it?
Yeah. And then part of me is kind of like, well, what? And they're like, oh no, we couldn't possibly show that to the parents. And I'm like, well, then you're not filling it in, right?
And most of them actually have at the bottom parent signature and parents' comments. Yeah. And they'll never get filled out, because even if like that, I used to suggest it, poor being like, well, I've done the work. I'm proud of what I've done. They're like, no, that goes home at the end of the year. Aww. Like, that doesn't help at the end of the year when they're learning how to use the scissors for the first time here in November.
Because it's such a powerful learning opportunity for parents to get to know their child in a different setting, in a different area, and support that work that the teacher is doing also from home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to get to know what to do at home with their child as well. Because as you said, you take it for granted because it is what you do and it is your background. But that's why you do the workshops, because like same as I know about something and you know about something else and I don't know about what you know, we can exchange that information. So that's what that communication from teachers should support.
And actually, out of curiosity, you were mentioning how you did like the photograph walls and all of your paperwork and things like that. Were they done in your paid time, or did you have to take them home in your own time?
As the years went on, they were always done during my paid time. I would have been very bad at doing it. You know, you throw yourself into your job. You'd be taking home artwork and photocopying stuff and cutting it up and having it all perfect and ready for the next day during your free time. Increasingly, as it went on, I was able to fight for myself. That you would do it. Now, it also helped that things like GDPR tightened up. Mm-hmm. When I think of the time somebody would take home like a bag of like, I'll finish these reports at home, which is such an innocent thing to do, because you know they're going to be safely in your house, but at the same time, you're not supposed to take that information off site. It's supposed to be all locked away, files, all that kind of stuff. The same with photographs. You shouldn't have the photographs. Now, increasingly as time went on, I got much better at being like, if you want me to do this, then you put someone into the room to replace me, because I can't supervise those children and also do this. So I have no problem doing this work, but how I get it done is up to you. But that is really difficult to do. And I think you have to be a certain type of person, first of all. And I'm not confrontation at all. But as the years have gone on and you know, all those little incidents build up and you're like, I wish I had done that. The next time something comes up, you're like, well, this time I'm going to do it. Yeah. So it comes with experience. It's not easy to do. And I think even since becoming a parent, even though I haven't worked in it, I'm a little bit more ballsy. I'm a bit, no, you can't actually say that to me, or that's not the way this is going to happen. I have less time and energy to spend on catering to other people and what they want. So I think that came at the end of my job as well, or at the end of my working kind of in early years. I was able to be like, well, no, that's not going to happen that way. If you want me to do it, I can come up with a couple of solutions, but you're going to have to give me something too. It's
interesting that as early years educators, we have to learn to be so assertive and we have to learn to be able to fight for ourselves and fight for naturally what should be done in class and what should be done in our paid time. But we have to fight to get those benefits. It's a right, really.
And I think that's part of the problem, what's wrong with the sector. If you had just put me in a room of preschool children or like whatever it was, and I was doing that job, you'd be flying. The problem is practitioners go into that room and they bring about half a dozen other problems with them that have nothing to do with how they actually work with those children, everything to do with the structure of the setting itself, the structure of the system that's not letting the setting manage their staff properly, pay them properly, all those different issues. So it means then when you have to have a certain kind of resilience to be able to set that all aside to work with tiny children and not let that impact your job or by default have some sort of impact on what those children experience in there. So that's the problem. If you're having so many other problems in the system, your staff become burnt out really, really quickly because it's not the job that's burning them out. It's everything around them that they have to firefight to be able to do that job properly. I got a bit ranty there.
I can confirm not a lot has changed since you've left the system.
Oh, no. Okay, I think we could talk about early years education for a long time, but we need to acknowledge as well, and parenting and in the society, how much we've learned and we've everything has improved in the last few years, but not forget that there's still a lot to do in the sector. But now, moving to starting preschool, what tips would you give, or what makes this transition easier, or what can help parents support their children's transition into preschool in September? What advice could you give?
Well, there's loads of things. Sometimes I think when we have children that are so small, and of course you'll get everybody going, oh sure, look, in my day we just threw them in and that was fine. But that doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. I think the biggest thing that came was anecdotally a couple of years ago, people were very worried about their children transitioning into preschool after being at home during a very intense period. And I kind of went, well, I can think off the top of my head, a half a dozen things we could do. And that's where the idea came from. And it's kind of just gained traction each year that people still want that information. It's still a big step for a child, because it is the first one they make outside of that family circle into a community circle. And there's a lot going on there. I mean, they have to separate from the family a little bit, but they're also entering into a new environment where there's a lot more people, children their own age, other adults, and there's a lot of expectation placed on them. I will limit this to 2 or 3 tips. The first thing I would say in relation to the expectation, you are the person who knows your child best. So you will know how they deal with stress up until now, various little things that have happened. You know, do they have a little bit of separation anxiety when you leave them with a babysitter or with a grandparent? Because if they do, that could be a clue that there could be a little bit of separation anxiety in September. At this stage, I would say for the people who might be in your child's life on a kind of a daily or weekly basis, to make sure they don't keep asking your child about preschool. Because if you sense that they have a little bit of nervousness about it, that's only going to make it worse. It's not going to make it better. Even if they are excited about going to preschool, I would say tone it down, because all of a sudden it becomes just, you know, this overwhelming sense of excitement. And it's a long time. Like, I mean, 6 to 8 weeks in a 2 or 3 year old's life is a long time to have to wait. So it'll be this thing hanging over them all summer. So I would say, read your child really carefully. If you don't know where your child is with them, kind of bring it up through a book, a little bit of small world play, something in which you can introduce the idea and see what their reaction is. If their reaction is quite neutral, you're good to go. You can just wait a little bit closer to the time to start to do the preparation stuff. And if they are over excited or nervous, it means then you can know that you have to put a few more things in place. And maybe that's when you kind of go to the library, get a couple of picture books for them, think about what little small world games you can do, or draw out kind of what their worries might be. See what their reaction is. Like, you could even do things like pretending to do the drop off with little figures in the car and seeing what they do. And if they go like, oh no, but you're going to come with me, that will give you an idea that they don't understand yet that they're going to go into a room. Little things like that can be so simple, but can take whatever's in their brain out of their brain without it being an overwhelming conversation in which they don't really understand what you're trying to say to them, or what you're, you know, that you're trying to, it's too wordy for them. So doing it through play is how you're going to get inside their brain, and also be able to then reassure them by playing through the little scenarios. Another thing to prepare them, I would say, to not focus on the practical life skills. I see a lot of people going, all right, well, they can't open their lunchbox. They need to be able to do their own shoes. They need to be able to do their coats. They learn all that in preschool. If you think they might need one thing for a little element of confidence, so that when they go into this environment, that they have something familiar that they can do themselves, just to give themselves a boost of self-esteem, I would say start with the lunchbox. It sounds so simple, but it means then you can use it over the summertime. They can get really familiar with it, play to their strengths, know what they can already open and can't open, and buy a similar lunchbox and let them use it. So again, it's a familiar item that they can do and have a little bit of like, oh, she said get the lunchbox, I know I can do that, and get it. Everything else they will learn. That's part of what preschool is about. So all these life skills that, you know, you think, oh, well, they'll get on better if they know how to do that. Don't worry about that at all. Oh, so many tips going around my head. The last tip I'll give is on the day. I suppose people's main worry will be what their child will do, how their child will react. And I would say the biggest thing to do here is to trust, first of all, yourself, that you've prepared your child as well as you can for it. And I don't mean just specifically for it, but in general terms of how you've parented them, how you have made them aware of themselves and in the world, and that they will be able to do this, and trust that you've done a good job doing that. Trust your child's ability to take on a challenge and work through it. You don't have to see that they might have a little wobble and get straight in front of it. Allow them to know what that feels like, and be like, oh, because they very often will kind of go, okay, well, everybody else is doing this, I can do it as well. So trust your child's ability to be able to assess the situation themselves, and give them the time and the space to figure it out. Don't micromanage the situation. And then also trust the practitioner, because they're the ones who have done this year in, year out. And every year there will be children who will have a wobble, who will have a little bit of separation anxiety. And they will have various strategies. If the practitioner is really good at their job, they will be able to communicate this to you in the moment. It always frustrates me, again, back to the communication point, that I think this should be like a little intro pack for parents beforehand, letting them know that
what to expect
and how the practitioners might help you at the moment. Because the amount of times I was ever standing at a door with a child who was upset.
Do I leave? Do I stay? Do I hide?
The parent is doing their best, and you're trying to honour that, because again, they know their child best, they know how to comfort them, and you're trying to take those cues. But there's a certain point at which you step closer and you're like, look, I can help your child come into the room, and just know that because the majority of the time, and you will know this, the majority of the time, it's the separation anxiety that is making them upset. As soon as they get into that room, they want to do everything, and they will do everything. But that the practitioner will, if something isn't going right within the first 3 or 4 minutes after the parent has left, they will call you. They're only second to the parent in wanting this to go really, really well. And they know that, yes, they can encourage the child to come into the room, but they also are able to assess really quickly at which point it becomes detrimental to the child's ability to do this. They're not ever going to leave your child upset. They're not going to try and push them too much. So if it isn't going well, just know that moment of separation kind of has to happen for your child to learn that you go away and you come back again, and that the practitioner will have yours and the child's best interest at heart. Now, it's a really difficult thing to say, because my logical practitioner head knows that this works 99% of the time. And when it doesn't, we put a different plan in place in which we go much more slowly for the child. That's the way it should be. My parent head knows how difficult this is. I had one child swan off into preschool when she was barely 3 years old, and didn't even give me a backward glance. And that's nearly worse, because parents are like, well, hang on a second, you should be wanting me and loving me. But no. My second child was the complete opposite, and it was absolutely horrible as the parent. And even though I trusted the practitioners, they had Quiva for 2 years. I trusted them. I knew they'd be amazing with them. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Oh.
But
yeah,
it worked out well. Now, I also know that if I was able to read him well enough to know that after a couple of days, if that wasn't going well for him, we would have tried something different. I also know the practitioners would have stepped in and been like, right, well, this isn't, there's no progress being made. It's like little steps, and then all of a sudden off they shoot. So on the day, if it's not going well, just trust yourself, trust your child, trust your practitioner, and just know that between those 3 things, over a certain amount of time, you'll get through the door, and be prepared for the fact that they might not do that at all and leave you in their dust.
And that's only more traumatizing at the end.
For the parent it is, yes.
Yeah, and it'd be nice as well to have like a social group for the parents, a place where the parents could stay and have a coffee, and instead of going home on your own and just overthinking about what's going on in the classroom. I think that'd be even using one of the class or outside space or something, because they're only there for 1 or 2 hours, I think, on the first day.
Yeah.
And to get to know each other and have that connection and networking, that'd be amazing.
I always tell parents as well to have something planned.
Yeah.
So that you're not, because it is strange. Yeah. Especially if it's your first child and you have other children to look after, but when it's the last one, all of a sudden this time is. Now, you've learned how to fill it very quickly. But those first couple of weeks do feel a bit strange. So for that first day to, again, not forget yourself. There's nothing that will work well for your child if you don't give a certain percentage to looking after yourself for yourself's sake, and then also for your children's sake. I truly believe that now. You can't do anything unless you look after yourself first.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they're really great tips. And I would also add... offer as many experiences, and that's again a long-term preparation for preschool or school, but offer your child as many experiences as possible growing up. Even if they're going to go to the shop and buy a cupcake, give them €2 and get the child to give the €2 to the shop, to the shopkeeper, or to play groups and workshops and swimming, and get them to talk to if they want something. If they're gonna go to a restaurant and order food, get the child to say, I want sausages. As simple as that. They'll be so much prepared to deal with new situations and new environments.
Yeah, it's very true.
My very last question, where do you see yourself in? I would say 5-10 years. I'm going to go with 2 years.
With 2 years. 2 years. I would like the workshops to have a regular schedule, because at the moment with life being so crazy, and that's the beauty about the business up until this point, is that I have been able to pull back from it when I need it and put it in place when I could. So to be more consistent, but also to be doing more things like this, I suppose, like on panels, talking to different people's audiences, just increasing the way in which I can get the information out there. Because the combination of my experience as a practitioner and a parent, I think really helps. Obviously, when people say, oh, well, you've only parented 2 children, but it's the empathy, it's the understanding and the insight into things that have really changed my perspective.
It's not about the quantity, because you can parent 50 children and still not do a good job.
Yes. But it just has really changed my perspective as to what was valuable in my early years education and experience. And I think all of that coming together, I have so much information that I just know when I see parents struggling or have a wobble with something, I'm just like, no, you've got it. And you just tweak this or change that, or, you know, what you want to talk about, what it is that you're worried about is not actually something you should be worried about. So I would love to be kind of speaking on bigger platforms, doing workshops for other associations and committees, just to, I suppose, get it all out there, and just increase the amount of people I can talk to.
Brilliant. I think you are a natural.
Thank
I
you.
think that's exactly where you should be, and we're so happy to have had you here today.
Thank you so
sharing
much.
all the information.
Yeah, I absolutely love being able to listen to all the experience as well, from an education background as well as a parental background as well, and kind of sometimes when the two of them kind of fight together and you have to try to get them to go together a little bit more. Yeah.
No, I love this. I'll be buzzing for the rest of the day now after this chat. An actual adult conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to share your own story on our podcast, please get in touch through our social media. Don't forget to like, share and follow so you'll never miss out on upcoming episodes. See you next time!